Demon Slayer is a newer anime that follows the quest of Tanjiro Kamado, a teenage boy whose family is killed by demons in the first episode. Tanjiro's little sister Nezuko is the only one who survives. But when he takes her to get medical help, Tanjiro finds out she has been turned into a demon. Tanjiro is determined to change his sister back into a human, even though that seems impossible. He therefore trains to become a member of the Demon Slayer Corps to both protect his sister and search for a way to turn her back into a human. The story takes place in Taisho-era Japan, which is roughly 1912 to 1926. There are many visually Japanese elements, such as the clothes the characters wear and some architectural elements. Of most interest to me is, of course, the music. When I first watched the show, I noticed there was music that sounded distinctly non-Western. I wanted to figure out more about what these elements were, so I did some research and discovered what I believe to be some Japanese classical music elements that exist in the score. What I present here is by no means an exhaustive list of these elements, but will give you some highlights and things to listen for as you watch the show. Now, I do want to preface this video by saying I am by no means an expert in Japanese classical music. Most of the information for this video comes from a world music course that I was a graduate teaching assistant for. The professor of the course was an ethnomusicologist, so she has training beyond mine as a musicologist in examining music outside of the West. In addition to information from this course, I also looked for other credible sources that went into more specifics about some of these aspects. However, it was very hard to find anything. What I did find spoke in generalities, much like the world music course, so that's what I have to go off of. I also looked for information on the creation of music for this anime, but was not able to really find anything on that either. Thus, all the connections I draw are my own observations based on what I know generally of Japanese classical music. As such, they should be taken as speculation, not fact. If you are an expert, or grew up around these musical traditions, or know anything about the composer's intentions, I would love to hear your thoughts about my take in the comments. Now that that disclaimer is out of the way, let's dive in. This score is truly a masterpiece by composers Yuki Kaijura and Go Shina. The score seamlessly blends traditional Japanese elements with Western orchestral music and some electronic music ideas as well. I'm going to focus on how the Japanese elements function in the first few episodes of the first season to avoid any unnecessary spoilers, although the same ideas do continue through at least season 2. I haven't had the chance to watch season 3 yet. One element used fairly frequently throughout the show is the use of voices. Singing style in Japanese music was surprisingly the hardest element to find good information about. I found a few audio examples that were the most beneficial, but as far as any descriptive writing about singing style, it was hard to find. Some of the singing in Demon Slayer reminded me of the sort of nasally higher-pitched style popular in Chinese Peking opera. There is potential influence here, since other elements of Chinese music made their way to Japan. I was also able to find this recording of some modern singers singing a Japanese folk song. The singing style sounds similar to some of what we find in Demon Slayer. Here's a clip of those singers to get that in your ear. As I was trying to describe what the singing sounds like for this script, I realized maybe that's why there aren't a lot of readily available written sources on the topic, because it is a little hard to describe. It sounds more like singing through your nose, which is very different from how a Western singer would be trained. This creates a thinner nasally sort of sound that you would not typically hear in Western music. Let's listen to a clip of this from the Demon Slayer score so you have a better idea of what I'm trying to say. Actually, let's not, because YouTube got mad. The clip I played is a theme that seems directly related to the demons. At least it plays frequently when demons are discussed in the show or present on screen. Here are a few more examples of that. From Season 1, Episode 1, we have Tanjiro smelling the scent of blood before discovering his dead family.
The smell of blood.
In Season 1, Episode 2, we hear the theme again, when Nezuko is looking at the human a demon was eating while trying to control her own urge to follow suit. One more example is in Season 1, Episode 4, during the Demon Slayer exam, when Tanjiro smells a demon close by. Note there's kind of an electronic sort of beat underneath, showing some of that mixing of styles I mentioned towards the beginning of this video. These are just a few examples of times this demon theme shows up with this sort of traditional style of singing. However, the theme is not always presented in this way. For example, in Season 1, Episode 1, when the man in the village is telling Tanjiro about demons for the first time, we hear the theme in lower-pitched, Western, for lack of a better term, sounding voices.
There have always been man-eating demons prowling about after dark. That's why it's not safe to go outside at night. Time for bed. You can set off for home at first light.
There is another example of different orchestration for this theme, which I will save for later in the video. Note that even though the orchestration in this theme does change, each time we hear it, it relates in some manner to demons. I'd have to sit down and do a more thorough analysis to see if there are any more specific patterns to the choice of orchestration in each instance. This is something I'd be happy to do if people are interested in that. But for this video, I want to keep it focused on a general overview of Japanese musical elements. Although the singing style is frequently used with this particular theme, it is also used in some other instances. For example, in Season 1, Episode 1 again, we hear the same sort of singing style as Tanjiro charges at the water Hashira, Tomioka, to rescue his sister Nezuko.
You let your emotion drive you to charge at me. You are a fool!
One of the most easily recognizable elements is the use of non-Western instruments. One of the more common timbres in the soundtrack is the flute. Sometimes this is the Western flute that you would find in a symphony orchestra and most scores. The Demon Slayer score also uses the Japanese nokan flute quite often. The nokan flute looks and sounds a bit like the Western piccolo, although with a slightly different timbre. It has a high, piercing sound that is somehow soft at the same time. Here's a nokan flute in isolation. The nokan flute is still used today in kabuki theater in Japan. If you've never heard of kabuki theater, I highly recommend you look it up. Some of the dramatic elements, including frozen poses and colors indicating different character traits, appear to be culturally grounded ideas that tend to bleed into anime. This is an interesting topic that I don't really have time to get into here, but go check out kabuki theater, especially if you're a fan of anime. Anyways, back to the nokan flute. This instrument is used in a variety of settings in the Demon Slayer score. Sometimes it's in calmer settings, such as Season 1, Episode 3, when Tanjiro is training with Urokodaki, the masked man. The nokan flute comes in playing a lovely melody that seems related to Nezuko or Tanjiro and Nezuko together, as Tanjiro checks in on his sleeping sister.
Nezuko, I'm home.
Another example of a similar context is later in the same episode, when Makomo, the mysterious little girl, is training Tanjiro.
Sabito and I, we both love Urokodaki very much.
She said that a lot, almost like a catchphrase. She and Sabito weren't siblings. They were orphans, and Urokodaki raised them.
We're not alone, though. There are lots of other children, too. They're always watching you, Tanjiro.
The nokan shows up in many intimate contexts such as this, but also over top of some dramatic moments. For example, the nokan is used in an action sequence in Season 1, Episode 6, when Tanjiro is on his first Demon Slayer Corps assignment. Tanjiro again smells a demon, this time in a town where girls have been mysteriously disappearing. And as soon as he smells it, he springs into action. At first, we hear some aggressive drumming, then the demon theme in lower voices. Then the nokan flute comes in over top and blends with the violin solo before the music cuts out.
Hey, wait! Where are you going?
So fast.
The scent got stronger! The demon's active!
How'd he do that?
The nokan over top of this thicker orchestration with a driving beat happens frequently in later episodes, so be on the lookout for that if you're a fan of the show. The shamisen is a plucked string instrument. It is held like a guitar, but only has 3 strings. It has many uses in traditional Japanese music. The shamisen is used to accompany folk songs and as part of a kabuki theater ensemble. It is also, more famously, the geisha's instrument. Let's listen to what this instrument sounds like in isolation. The title card music in Demon Slayer is one of the most easily recognizable uses of this instrument. This is a very short clip of music, but it is heard in every episode except the first. We first hear some wordless singing, followed by a quick drum and several notes on the shamisen. Let's give that a listen. The shamisen is also used in more extended sections of the music. One of these is found in the flashback in Season 1, Episode 5. In this clip, we get a glimpse into Urokodaki's demon fighting days. We hear the demon theme on the shamisen instead of the typical vocals, as the camera pans from the demon to Urokodaki. Another example of the shamisen that combines with the nokan is in the same episode, after Tanjiro passes the Demon Slayer Corps exam. He and the other successful applicants are told to choose the ore that their sword will be made out of. As Tanjiro sniffs, then moves forward to grab a piece of ore, we hear the shamisen and the nokan. One other element that is possibly used is the influence of Taiko drumming. This is more of a stretch since a lot of cultures use drumming. Without a deeper analysis of drumming patterns, it's hard to say what culture the drumming might be inspired by. Since both composers of the Demon Slayer soundtrack are Japanese, it is certainly possible their inspiration comes from their own culture. Taiko drumming, however, originates after the time period of Demon Slayer. It is mostly a post-World War II invention, although many of the patterns are rooted in ritual Shinto music. Taiko drumming is a very modernized version of these patterns that incorporates exaggerated performance aspects that are, of course, lost in a soundtrack. Here's an example of Taiko drumming to listen to. A lot of the drumming in Demon Slayer makes me think of something Hans Zimmer or one of his crew might write for a Hollywood blockbuster. Although who knows where Zimmer is drawing his inspiration from. It could very well be Taiko drumming or another cultural tradition. It is certainly not drawn from German classical music, although Zimmer is from Germany. Regardless of where the drumming is inspired from, there is certainly a lot of it in Demon Slayer, and it is often incorporated with Japanese instruments and typical Western instruments and ideas. Most of this video has focused on specific timbres associated with Japanese music. One aspect I've not talked about at all is harmony. Fun fact, there is actually no harmony in traditional Japanese music. So any kind of chords or harmonic progressions are likely Western influenced. Japanese music does have scales, however, just not chords. Traditional scales are pentatonic, meaning they consist of 5 notes, rather than our Western scales, which mostly consist of 7 notes. When examining the frequently used melodies in Demon Slayer, they all seem to fit well into Western keys. So I don't believe there is much, if any, influence of the scales in this score. For example, here's a transcription of that demon melody. I put it in A minor just to make it easier to look at. It does only use 5 pitches, but 5 pitches alone does not signify a pentatonic scale. The gaps of whole and half steps, and sometimes bigger intervals between the notes, are what matters. I feel like I really didn't explain this well, so I'm recording this bit last minute, which is why the sound quality is suddenly awful. I want to point out the various interval patterns in these Japanese modes, and then look at the 5 notes in that demon melody so you can hopefully get a better idea of what I was trying to say. You can note the patterns of whole steps, which are the W's, and minor thirds, which is that lowercase m with a 3, in the Ryo, Ritsu, and Yo modes. And then the In mode has half steps, major thirds, and a whole step in there as well. That mode was actually invented in the 17th century. I'm not actually sure when the other ones were, but I'm assuming they're older, so that one's a little bit different. Now, if we look at the pattern of intervals in the 5 notes presented in that demon melody, we'll see that it really doesn't fit into any of those at all. See that we have a half step, a couple whole steps, and a perfect fourth. The perfect fourth is the real outlier here. None of those modes had an interval nearly that big. It would be very unusual for any pentatonic scale to have an interval that big. What this suggests to us is that there are more than 5 notes in this mode. So it's most likely, again, a natural minor scale, because if you just fill in 2 notes there, you would have the pattern for a natural minor scale. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I think it's a natural minor scale now. If we look closely, there is evidently a tonic-dominant relationship between the A and E at the beginning of this melody. Furthermore, all the notes fall into A natural minor, and that opening AE suggests A minor as a strong possibility for this theme. Throughout the score of Demon Slayer, timbre seems to be the element relied on the most to convey a sense of Japaneseness in the music. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through the Demon Slayer score, examining different musical elements, how they function, and how they mix together. I hope you have gained a greater appreciation and understanding for some traditional Japanese music elements and how they function in Demon Slayer. If you're a fan of the show, I hope you'll be on the lookout for how these kinds of elements are used in later episodes. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you want to see future content. Thank you all so much for watching.